Music in all of its ancient glory was inspiration itself. It was a gift of the muses and touched mathematics, as well as poetry, science, philosophy. It permeated mythology, drama, ritual, athletics, dance, ethics, storytelling, and of course, love. But what did ancient music sound like? What instruments and melodies did they use? And how can we reconstruct these ancient sounds today? Hello, this is Anya Leonard, founder and director of Classical Wisdom, a site dedicated to bringing ancient wisdom to modern minds. You can now find us, along with our free newsletter, at classicalwisdom.substack.com. Today's Classical Wisdom Speaks podcast is with Argentine luthier and musician Alberto Magnin and Classical Wisdom's former editor Kristin Deasy. They'll take you on a musical journey straight from the Patagonian Mountains. Alberto's career and the investigation and making of ancient instruments will deepen your cultural understanding of the ancient world, bringing sound to history. Best of all, Alberto and Kristin will perform ancient melodies on ancient instruments, immediately transporting you to another time and place. But before we begin, a quick thank you to our Classical Wisdom Society members who make this podcast possible. If you'd like to become a society member and help support the classics, please go to classicalwisdom.substack.com and subscribe. Now onto the magical world of ancient music.
It's very likely that music began something like this. I'm sitting here today with Alberto Magnin, who is a luthier of ancient instruments and a musician based out of Patagonia, Argentina. And he's going to explain why we began today's podcast with these sounds. Alberto, what were all of these crazy sounds we just heard? And why are they important?
Hello.
Hi.
Well, I think in the beginning, this type of sounds were the first that man make, looking to the nature, looking to the birds, to the waterfalls, to the sounds that nature makes, the thunder, and that were very big and very sometimes amazing for the people. So these type of sounds are made with the elements of nature. It's a more antique because they are not like a drum that you have to process a high and make it. These are just elements of nature that are percuted.
I see a turtle shell here, which I think I've seen turned into instruments in Greece, like the lyre, but this is just the turtle shell. So what is its purpose? What does it sound like?
Well, when a turtle dies or is killed for food, and with a stick, you do like this, you make several different sounds. Here we have to speak also that these sounds produced in the bodies of the people, like dance. The dance was there very mixed with these sounds, and people try to speak with nature, so it will be how you say, soft, or like not perilous.
So the nature will be kind to them.
Be kind to them. So this is like a dialogue with nature.
Right.
They're speaking the same language.
Right. I mean, you live close to nature here. I'm looking out the window and I see all of these trees. You have a big farm. So this is something that you actually practice as a luthier in your daily life. But what I heard you say was these primordial instruments really, in your view, came out of the ancient people's desire to imitate nature and thus feel some connection with her, or perhaps even control over the elements that could be so dangerous to them at that time. I mean,
You say better than me. Better than me.
No, I'm just making sure that we're all on the same page. So I also see sitting over here a huge jawbone of some beast with, it still has its teeth.
Yeah. Well,
What?
in this case, it's like a horse.
Okay.
That when it's there, the teeth get loose.
Okay. And it
And
becomes
you
an
can
instrument.
do a percussion. It's a very powerful one.
It's very
I think
powerful.
these instruments were related to the magic, no? The way to influence nature. So I speak of dance also. The dance might tell stories also with the body, and the chants. All these produce a sensation that you can make a dialogue with nature, like a pact. How you say?
Like a pact, some
yes.
kind of an agreement. You
a
don't
a
hurt
kind
me.
of agreement with nature.
I'll speak your language. Now you please don't hurt me or take care of me or protect me in some way. Huh.
And the more important thing to say of these instruments that they are not elaborate things. They're just the elements that you percute as you find them.
Well, and in difference to how they were being played when this podcast was opened, which was chaotic, there was no sense of rhythm. In the ancient world, when and how, if you know, where was, say, the turtle shell beat in rhythm, and what role did rhythm have?
Well, humans have rhythm naturally with the heartbeat, with the blood going in and out of your heart, and just when you walk or you run, or the animals make sounds in the earth like tum 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 tum. When they run out of you're chasing them, they make sounds, rhythmic sounds. So this may be also because we have to remember that the first people more probably will be cazadores, how you say?
Yeah, they
hunters.
would be hunters, yeah.
So it was very important to know the comportamiento, the behavior
Yes.
of the animals, no? And to imitate them, to speak their language, to ask them permission to be eaten.
It was a whole nether world. Well, I mean, when I think of ancient sounds, I often think of a sound like this. When did that enter the picture?
Well, imagine you chase a big animal, and you take the meat and the hair, you put it, you throw it so over a tree, of roots of a tree. Then this wets, and then comes the sun, and the hair will stick.
Will stretch. The hide will stretch. Yes.
Over anything, and you would touch it with a stick, and you will feel, wow, this is a good sound. And then you will try to get it better, put it in a frame, and you just show me a frame drum. This is the generic name of this drum that was one of the more distributed,
Like widely distributed?
in the Mediterranean and in the ancient world, in Sumeria and Egypt and all these old places where we know the civilization began. This was widespread, and another information is that these were played by women that were the priestess of the goddess.
Only by women?
In the first, yeah, you can see in the pictures, in the stone carvings, in the wood, in the ceramic, that it were women. It was related with women. Perhaps the form of like a moon, perhaps many things that make this was a woman instrument.
So I guess I'll have to play this instrument when we make some music later on. And well, I just want to return for a moment to rhythm, which you said, okay, rhythm's something that comes to us naturally. But now, I mean, there's all sorts of rhythms you can have. You have rhythms in rap, you have rhythms in classical music. And what were the rhythms like for these ancient people? Do we know?
Well, depends where, no? If we were focusing in the Mediterranean, because we have all the world has drums. And the shamanic world is full of drums because it was like a language to speak with the forces of nature, more than speaking of gods. The gods in the forces of nature was a way to put the mind in a state of ecstasy, to speak with the spirits of the nature that were very important to have by the side of the people, no?
Right.
And we have many kinds of rhythms that were very popular in this time, that were not the ones we use more normally in the Western world, like the rhythms of 2 or 4 or 6, but they have very much the rhythm of 5 and 7. You can find it in the Greek, you can find it in Egypt, in the Sumerian world, this kind of rhythm.
Well, wait, I'm going to stop you for a second. For somebody who doesn't know anything about music, can you play something that's, like you said, 2, 4, and 6 are more something we're familiar with, and then 5, 7, so that people can hear the difference?
Yeah. This will be a rhythm like a 4, no? It's very straight.
Right.
But if you play something in 3, it's more. This is more normal in the Western world because of the bells and many rhythms that are in 3.
Right.
Then you have the 5. It's a sensation that you are going from one side to the other. Mm-hmm. And perhaps this is something that happens, that you go from one side of your cerebrum to the other.
Yeah,
no?
One side of your brain to the other.
Yeah.
That's probably what they'll find out.
And then you have 7.
Great. Well, I think maybe it's time to have a little mini concert of just drums. What do you think?
Yeah,
you and
can do it. You can do it.
Before we turn to the next section, which will be on the wind instruments, well, maybe we can play together. What do you think?
Yeah, we would like very much.
Okay, then let's do it. I will start out with 5, in a rhythm in 5, so we're going to just imitate, and we're going to go back in time and feel like we were part of the ancient world. And all together, we're going to listen or make some music. Alberto, can you explain to me where wind instruments first came from and what their purpose was?
Well, I believe that hearing the nature was inspiring thing to begin to make instruments and to have a dialogue with nature. And the birds, I think, is the most similar to what we can do with wind instruments. And perhaps we can talk about the materials that were available in this part of the world, that was the reed, the bamboos, and the clay, the earth. Also, we have to know that the cultures that arise in the Mediterranean also were related with other cultures more antique, that were the Egyptian, the Mesopotamian, and all these worlds influenced the creation of instruments. But surely hearing the birds was an inspiring thing for the wind instruments. And also, this I can say because I hear it in the bamboo, places where bamboo grows, when it breaks and the wind goes through, makes a sound like a flute.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is very, very important because you can see that the flutes are there, and then you cut the bamboo and begin to make them.
Right.
And surely they were made with hot irons, with fire. I like to do this with my instruments also, to make it with fire. It's a very inspiring and ritual thing to do. And in the how you say, in the class of wind instruments, the ones that are like the pan flutes, that there are many, each one with one note, I think it's the more antique, because you have not to think about tuning, but just cutting different bamboos, you get different sounds.
Right.
Now I will show you one that is made of feathers of a bird.
Right. I'll explain to you, for those of you who are listening. The feathers, it's the bottom part of the feather, so the feather is not actually on it anymore. And the bottom part of the feather varies in size, creating different notes. And now we're going to listen to it and hear how it sounds.
This is from a condor. I think in Mediterranean there are no condors, but there are big birds like águilas.
Yeah, there are certainly eagles and hawks and things like that. Wow, it's really powerful.
Well, this is the instrument, it was believed Pan played in the forest of Greece.
That's right. That's right.
Pursuing the nymphs.
That's right. Well, he certainly knew how to make them dance.
Perhaps it was more, the sound more like this one, that is bamboo one.
Okay. What do you think? Was it trial and error to find out how long exactly to make each one so that a note comes out, or we don't know?
Well, we can believe things, and one thing I believe is the first notes were more near the pentatonic scale, because you can see now in the ancient cultures that still are in the world, they play scale similar to the pentatonic scale.
And the
that
pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale,
It's a
right?
5-note scale
Okay.
that is related with the first harmonics that you get from any sound
Right.
you produce.
Right. Pythagoras wrote about that, right?
Huh?
Pythagoras wrote about the pentatonic scale
yes,
and the harmonies.
yes.
But we'll get more into that when we talk about stringed
Okay.
instruments, and we'll talk about the scales and how things developed. But I'm sure that these wind instruments were a precursor to that, because you see it visually, at least on these pan flutes, that a longer reed or bamboo gives you a certain type of note, and a shorter one gives you another one.
Also, one thing surely was that when they begin to make flutes with holes, first they put their fingers where it get good to put them.
Right, where it was comfortable.
Where
That's right.
where they are comfortable, they put the holes.
Right. They're making it easy at least.
And then begin to see that some notes were more agreeable, more nice than others, and then you can change it by making the hole a little bigger or putting a little faster from the other.
So when you make one of these flutes and you burn the holes in the ancient way, because you make instruments the way the ancients made them, do you have to measure the distance so they're exactly the same distance apart?
I make so many flutes in my life that I can see the bamboo and know where to put the holes and just adjust a little with a tuner.
Wow.
But I know where it's a proportion, you know, when the reed is long, the holes are faster from each other.
Are farther
When it
apart.
gets more little, they are
Mhm.
more near.
Okay.
But you can see these proportions here. There's a little hole where the semitone,
Where the half tone.
the half tone is. But then it's trial and error.
Right.
You can make a very good tune instrument after 3 trials and error, because you make one and you feel that it's not tuned. Then you know that if you push it upward or make the hole bigger, you will rise the tone. So you do it in the second flute, and perhaps still it's not perfect, but in the next one you will be really near to the perfection. So trial and error is a tool that surely humanity use for making good things
That's
in all
right.
aspects.
That's right. Well, let's hear how one of these flutes sounds.
This is a little more evolution because it has a embocadura,
Right. It has a mouthpiece.
a mouthpiece. Here you can see you have 7 holes, but the more antique flutes has 6.
Uh-huh.
I will explain why. Because there's something you call octave,
Right.
and you get the octave with an harmonic of the same position of the hands. For example, I make one note, I didn't change anything here, and I produce an octave,
How did you do that?
blowing a little more harder.
Wow.
And then in this kind of flute you have 6 because you have saying do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, and you put the same one and you make a little more pressure with your lips and you get the octave.
Right.
So you get
So it's really a 7 note.
But what happens? There's a mysterious thing that when you push a little more harder, you don't get the octave, you get the 5th. Because it's the law of the harmonics. You can hear this like this.
Right.
You don't get in the 3rd blowing, and then it begins to happen this. The 5th begin to come. But we will speak a little later of this.
Oh, about the harmonies, but it's a good prelude.
Now
to
I
that.
played a transverse flute.
And this was in the key of C. Because
This is in the key of C,
C,
but
D, E, F.
really
G, A.
that doesn't matter. This is a
Okay.
convention.
Right.
Perhaps in the old time it was not a C, it was another note, because this is all conventions.
Right.
Hmm?
Exactly. Well, I think we have some more here. I'm looking at a flute that is not. It has. Well, I'm looking at a bunch of different flutes, but I see one here that does not have the shape of a traditional flute at all. It's actually the shape of an avocado, and it seems to be made out of ceramic. Can you tell me about this flute?
This is a globular flute. It means that it's closed. When you put all your fingers in the holes, there is no way out like
So
this.
how does it make sound?
Well, it has a different type of sound. And you cannot get octaves with this kind of flutes.
Okay.
You need this hole to go upper. But it has a very special
But I don't
sound.
understand. How does the sound come out if you're covering up every single hole with your fingers? Oh, there is a
In the mouthpiece.
There is a hole in the back of the
Yeah,
mouthpiece.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
And this is earth.
This is like an
Perhaps it's a
earth
more
thing.
antique material to make things, to make tools in the world. No, you can find this kind of flutes because you can in excavations,
Right.
archaeologists find these pieces.
The ceramic. Wow.
Perhaps it's more. You can find it more in America. There was more culture of making instruments of clay than in Europe, but also they were made. So I will show you a little of how is the sound of this one. We have to talk also that one aspect is that all these kind of sounds were made also for dance. You can feel that when you hear some music, there's a movement in your body. Sometimes you don't express it, but there's a movement. And these instruments, the flute and the drum, were in Greece were used for dance.
Right, and various ceremonies as well, right? Sacrificial ceremonies,
Yeah.
funeral rites.
In births, funerals. Also, it was believed that you can attract good spirits and get out evil ones with music.
Right, you can repel the evil spirits. And unlike the drum, was the flute or were wind instruments played by both men and women, or do we know?
No, really, I don't know. There's not so much information. Yes, with the drums. The drums you can see in the pictures, in the rocks, in the paintings, and that they were women in the first
Right,
moment.
right.
I think it was a more male thing. The flutes and the drums were more women.
Right. Well, that will be appropriate as I will play the drums while you play the flute later on. But I see another
You can
flute.
see the phallic form of a flute also.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And these guys, I'm looking at the final flute that we have to talk about is like two flutes stuck together. So what's this
Well,
about?
because it was discovered that if you put one reed with one note and then make a scale over it, you can get a very harmonious thing because it begins to relate to this note. And this is the beginning of harmony.
Right. Do we know
It was in Greece. It was the aulos, but the aulos was more like a clarinet. They cut these reeds not like a normal clarinet or saxophone that you had the reed apart from the. This was cut in the same body of the. You cut like this, and put your mouth there and get a sound like a clarinet.
Wow, so they were more like clarinet flutes.
Yeah.
Clarinet double flutes.
You can hear it nowadays in India, in the snake charmers. They had a thing very similar to the aulos.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very antique instrument. Let's
Yeah.
hear how it sounds. it's beautiful. Well, Alberto, what about stringed instruments? Where did they come from?
Well, I think the development of string instruments is a little later in the history of humanity. We spoke in the other sections that the drums and the metal things and the things you percute and also the flutes are like very, very primitive. You can see it. We can understand this looking over to the cultures that today are mostly the same as they were 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. In some parts of the world, there still remain these unaltered cultures, and there we can see very primitive instruments of chord also. That is the next development that we can.
So the way you're looking at the evolution of music, if I understood you correctly, is that you examine cultures that haven't had an interruption in 2,000 years, and through that you're making assumptions based off of this on how things were developing in Hellenic Greece, for example, and perhaps in Rome. But Greece and Rome had so many more interruptions through warfare and being conquered by other cultures that we don't have the continuity that we have in what countries are these? Like India?
Well, we can see it in Black Africa also.
Uh-huh.
In some parts of the more primitive tribes in Africa.
That have continued
also,
this
we
tradition.
can see some chords, some liras, and some harps there. And if we speak of the harps, we can see that also in some pictures and carvings in the rock in Sumeria, they have harps, and in some excavations in Turkey, and also nowadays in Africa there are many kinds of harps. But we can assume that first there were one-string instruments. The first to discover how to stretch a gut from the intestines of the animals.
Right.
Correct what I said?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Intestinal.
Stretch it between 2 points
Uh-huh.
and have a gourd like a resonator,
Uh-huh.
and you can get a sound like this instrument that is one chord. Here I have a bamboo that when I stretch it, I change the tone. And these sounds, they have duration, they have a prolongation in time that speaks of also like an imitation of the voice. And here begins also this thing of like we speak in the double flutes, that we have one note and then we have a harmony we can make in the bass with a chord and then sing.
On top of that.
Because this is very common in all the cultures. The voice is up the instruments, no? So the first we can assume was a one-string instrument. Mixed with drums, with the voice. And when you have one chord, you can put one finger in it and get more notes. And then comes the harps of 8, perhaps 4 strings in Greece. They discovered that the first harps were like 4 or 5 notes, and then came 2 or 3 more, because I think we spoke of this when we spoke of the wind instruments, that the scales, the first scales were pentatonic.
And pentatonic is 5 notes. A
5
notes
notes.
Scale.
There are many kinds of pentatonic scales, but the major pentatonic scales is like in this primitive harp. Up and down.
Now, for those of us not musically inclined, they're going to think, wait, I heard way more than 5 notes, but it was doubled, right? They're
Yeah,
actually,
you
it's
have
the same 5 repeated
Repeat.
higher up in the register.
Yeah.
Okay.
The scale will be like this. so on. This scale
Wow.
is very magic because it's like a circular scale.
How is it circular?
Yeah, it's like a loop. Uh, each note you put goes to another, and the circles goes on. It's more difficult to do this with a normal scale of 7 or 12 notes. You have to resolve the
Right.
tension.
That's
Here
right.
is no tension. Well, I have to say this is a ngoni, that is an African harp,
Wow.
but as we say, related to the cultures of the Mediterranean.
Well, here's the thing. When I think of stringed instruments and ancient Greece, I think of the lyre.
Yeah, the lyre.
But is the lyre the same as a harp, or what's the difference between a lyre and a harp?
Well, in the harp, you have the strings perpendicular to the skin, and in the lyre you have parallel to the skin
In the
with a
lyre,
bridge.
they go parallel.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can
well,
see
in the
this
photos,
difference.
I hope that shows. Right.
In the harps, always it's like 90 degree. This is another kind. The goni is another kind. It's like a mix of lyre and harp.
Right.
But in the case of the lira, that is the more emblematic instrument of Greece. It has a mythological origin.
Mm-hmm. Apollo, no, is famously connected to the
Yeah,
lyre.
Apollo is. But the name is Terpandro, was the inventor of the lira in Greece.
Oh, who's
And
that?
then it was also in the history, Sappho was a very good player, and she added some strings. That it was very bad scene that she added some strings.
Why was it so bad?
Because perhaps she was a woman, and also because the traditional things are always like that. The people say this is the best that it can be done, and if you make some innovations, all the things will go wrong.
Oh.
This vision is very typical.
So
in
you mean
China.
in Sappho's time, it was looked down upon that she added more strings. It was seen as bad.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Not because you think it's bad.
So
And
the
wait,
lira,
wait. Who did you say was the inventor of the lira?
Terpandro,
Who's that?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Some Greek
That's
guy.
the name. And we have this problem with the history, no? Like mythological things that perhaps was another guy who
Right.
make it, but this name was there for something.
Okay.
Eh?
All right. Great. Now, what were you going to tell me?
Well, here I have 7 strings,
Mm-hmm.
the 7 notes of the, how you say, Occidental or
Yeah, the
New-
the Western scale.
the Western scale. So we have
So
strange
it
because
doesn't
not-
do an octave. It's like it almost
Yeah.
gets there.
no, the octave is 1 note more. Here
Right.
it's a 7 strings.
Right.
And for us, it's like a little strange
It's
because
a little
we
strange.
need this
It's like,
octave
no,
too.
you didn't finish. Yeah. And is this
But
the kind of lyre that Sappho used, or like what number of strings did she add, and how many strings did the first lyres have? Do you know? No.
I really don't know that, but I assume that she passed from the pentatonic scale to the 7th scale notes.
Right. So she went from 5 strings to 7 strings, probably.
Yeah,
And what we have here today is a 7-string
it's a
lyre.
more modern
So, Sapphic
where the
lyre.
modes came. We'll speak a little later of the modes. But the more typical duet was lira and flute.
This was the more typical duet,
Yeah.
like the duo, the lyre and the flute.
Yeah.
Okay. And this lyre has a unique feature, which seems like it features a turtle.
Yeah, as You can see in the vessels found of ceramic many pictures of the turtles.
The turtle
shell.
shell. And why
Yeah.
was the turtle shell used? Is it just
Because it was there, you know. You eat a turtle, and then what do you do? What to do with this? It's a very hard material. It's a very durable material, and this was a thing in the evolution of the string instruments, the discovery of the resonator.
right?
This can be this, but also can be a gourd, and later of wood.
Right.
But if you add a big resonator, you get more deep sounds. So the turtle has also a magic meaning, you know. All the relation between the animals and music was very ritual, very shamanistic also.
Well, right. I mean, in the beginning, didn't you say
Yes.
the strings were made out of the intestines of animals?
Yeah,
Right. I mean, there you go.
and also the drums, you know, it was higher. It's practically the body, external body of the animal there.
It's yeah.
And alive yet, because the skins as the gut strings and the hairs of the drums, they are a little alive because they change with the weather.
Hmm.
It's
Wow.
cold, it's dry, it's alive, it moves.
Right.
Mm?
Great. So I guess these lyres were probably used in ancient Greece at the famous dinner parties or to play for the really rich people.
Well, I think what I can see, observing the culture that are still alive, that in the first was more communal thing, like a communal where everybody participates in the ritual, and little by little when the elites came to the power and there were like palaces and castles, the musicians were like a little
Like entertainers
an
almost.
entertainment.
That's
the,
right.
The music passes to be an entertainment
Right.
and a show.
Right.
But in the first, it was more like for prayings and communicating with the nature that sometimes was good for the people, sometimes not.
And how this lyre that you made, how long ago did you make it? And
Oh, this like 30 years ago. It's one
Wow.
of my first string instruments. Now I make several types of harps, like gonis, koras, santurs, many kinds. But this was very, I don't know why. I think this was a turtle shell. I was in a voyage in Brazil.
You
and
were
I entered
in a village in Brazil?
a little village. I entered to buy some fish.
Okay.
And it was hung in the wall. And I see like this, oh, I can make an instrument of this turtles. And I buy it. And weeks and months later, I came here to my place and make the lira because I knew it was made from the Greek.
Wow, that's great. It's accompanied you for now 3 decades. Well, you mentioned a little bit about these mysterious things called modes. Can you help us understand that a little bit more?
Well, I will show you now in a more complex instrument that is a santur. That it also is a very old instrument. Surely when the Mediterranean was a full, all the culture, this instrument was already made in Persia.
Right.
That musicologists think is the origin of all the instruments and music.
In Persia?
Yeah,
Wow.
Persia, Babylonia, Assyria. These places were very developed for the time.
That's right.
So India was also, and China were getting very, very old and deep cultures, but they absorbed also from Persia. It was like a movement, you know. There was like roads,
Right, the Great
like
Silk
the Silk
Road.
Road,
Yeah,
and this the instruments moved.
that's right.
So you cannot speak of one instrument is from this place only. It's like mix.
Mhm.
Perhaps there are some origins of some instruments in places, but then they mix
Right. With
each
the
other.
trade routes and all of that influence,
So,
it's impossible to know. Right. Well, this
they-
looks like, I'm just going to describe it for people who are listening. This almost looks like a
It's
lap
like a
harp.
trapezoidal,
Yeah, it's a
box.
trapezoidal box.
and it has
for-
some bridges
yes.
that divide the chords,
That's
so you
right.
can get from the same chord 3 tones or basically 2 tones different.
He's playing the same note or the same string.
From
Or-
the same string, you divide the chord like a Pythagorean division of the sound.
Mm-hmm. Just like Pythagoras did to understand the difference between the
It's
tones.
the same principle of Pythagoras. He make it with monochord, it's one chord,
Mm-hmm.
and the division in mathematical parts, half, thirds, and fifths, fourths, make the origin of the scale.
But this instrument has many more than one chord. How many chords does this instrument have?
Well, you have 9 bridges of 4. 4 by 9, how is your mathematics?
Really bad. 50 something. Well, a lot of strings it has.
More than 70, I think it's 72.
Okay.
Okay, so in this instrument we can explain a little better the modes, because the mode is simply that you get one scale like A, B, C, D, the normal scale, Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Si,
Right, like C,
and you
D, E,
begin
F.
each time in one note different, and it makes a different scale if you begin the
Right.
scale.
But
like
for somebody who took piano lessons when they were little, and they know there's the C major scale, and then the next note would be the D major scale.
hmm.
What's the difference between that and a mode?
Okay, there's like many versions of this. I will take one of those,
Okay.
and we take that the major scale is the Dorian scale.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, that sounds very familiar to my
Yeah.
ears.
It's
That
like
is
the modern scale.
Like normal scale.
Yeah,
Okay.
because in many cultures, not only in Greece, they didn't think the major scale was the principal scale. In the medieval times, they think the minor scale was the principal scale.
Okay.
But now, continuing with this, we know that the Frisian will go one tone upper, like this.
Right.
we
Now
have
that
a minor
sounds
scale there.
strange to my ears.
Yeah,
And I'm sure our listeners
because you
as
know
well.
there are several minor scales. There's not only one. Depend where you begin. Some minor scales begin with half tone, and some minor scales begin with one tone and then the half tone.
Right.
So
What
this
I'm just
we-
going to take a pause for a second. What Alberto is explaining is basically, in ancient Greek times, there were various forms of scales, and we're used to the major scales and the minor scales, which have a certain pattern of whole tones and half tones that
Yeah.
we just have incorporated from hearing the radio from the time we were 2 years old, or how our mother used to sing to us. But in ancient Greek times, there weren't just two. There were, 8 or 9 different, I
Yeah,
don't even know, probably
because they have
8,
Dorium,
7 maybe.
Frisium, Lydium, Iperdorio, Iperfrisio, Iperlydio, and the more important thing, I think, to know is not if these were the names exactly for this type of scales, but they put some emotions in each of these scales. And this is very similar to the makams in the Arabic Persian tradition and the ragas in India. It's the same.
Right.
So this origin, you can see the
That's been kept alive
relation.
in these neighboring countries.
Yeah, and
So-
perhaps it becomes the origin in Greece, perhaps in Sumeria, or perhaps in India, but they are related.
Right. The important thing to understand about the modes is that each one starts on a different note, but each one has a different patterns of whole tones and half tones. That's why it will sound strange to you, and why each one brings up a certain kind of like emotive like feeling. Each one feels different. So now Alberto is going to introduce a few more for us so we can hear the differences.
Well, I will tell one more that is the Lydium, will be this one.
Maybe now, instead of just playing scales, because this is not going to become a boring music class here, we can hear some playing. If
Okay.
you feel like it.
We can mix African harp
Okay,
with a Persian instrument.
let's do it. And now we're going to bring it all together for you in a live concert. Alberto and I upstairs looking at the Patagonian Mountains as we play something in homage to the ancient world using all of their favorite instruments. So here we have strings, percussion, and flute all together in a concert just for you. Enjoy.
Thank you for listening to Classical Wisdom Speaks. Please go to classicalwisdom.substack.com to learn more about our work and to sign up for our free newsletter. You can also click subscribe to this channel and get more classics throughout the month. You can find Alberto Magnin's music on SoundCloud, Apple Music, Spotify, as well as YouTube. All of the links for that are below.